So recently I asked y'all to give me a top five anything and I'll make a TikTok about it. And shout out to my boy Draco Mays. He asked me what are my top five worst films that I've ever seen. And honestly, this is one of those lists where it was hard for me to it was hard for me to break it down to five because I done seen so much shit in my life that I just could not pick five. So I thought I'd give you at least 25 movies that I've seen that I think are the worst movies that I've ever seen. And again, thank you, Draco Mays, because this was definitely fun to reflect on. Though I will say my top two are number two is Dragon Ball Evolution. I tell you, this movie to me was an insult to. I'm not the type of person to say this ruined my childhood, but in the case of Dragon Ball Evolution, you did. This movie was just so bad. It was so wrong on so many levels. It was an insult to the Dragon Ball cartoon, the manga, the name, everything. This movie was just so bad. Ugh. I said Dragon Ball Evolution is an insult to my childhood, but the 50 Shades of Grey movies are an insult to my intelligence. I tell you, like, I saw the first movie in the theaters out of curiosity, and I didn't even watch the next two in the theaters, though I did see them, and all three of them are bad. Though I will say 50 Shades Free is better than the first two, but just this whole trilogy as a whole, this movie was made out of a fan fiction from Twilight. Let that sink in. These movies are just horrible. Speaking of Twilight, we have the entire Twilight saga, which is the whole reason the 50 Shades of Grey movies exist in the first place. It all started with here. It started with that first film, which was just bad, and then it was just all downhill. I'll give Breaking Dawn Part 2 a little bit of leeway, because it was entertaining at times, but this whole trilogy, this was just sparkling vampires, a love story that just doesn't make no sense, a love triangle that doesn't make no sense, piss poor acting. Thank God Robert Pattinson was able to rebound from this. Thank God Kirsten Stewart was able to rebound from this. I can't say the same for Taylor Lautner, but the Twilight movies have always been the bane of my existence in terms of movies. Let's go into the realm of superheroes with X-Men Origins Wolverine, which to me is not just the worst Wolverine movie, but it's the worst X-Men movie ever made. Now, granted, this movie is a victim of the writer's strike of '07 and '08, but still, there is no excuse for this movie. This is a piss poor script. They did my boy Wolverine dirty in terms of his origins. They did my boy Deadpool dirty. Granted, thank God we got good Deadpool movies, and thank God we're getting a Deadpool movie that teams up with Wolverine soon, but it was disrespectful to the rivalry between Wolverine and Sabretooth. No love to my boy Gambit. Just, this movie was just, oh. I am hoping and praying to God that Kevin Feige and company will finally give us a good Fantastic Four movie, because Fat Four Stick was the movie that made me go, okay, Disney, Marvel, come get your kids. This movie was the last straw for Fantastic Four fans and gave a lot of fans of the Fantastic Four no hope that there will be a good Fantastic Four movies. I got a bet going on with one of my coworkers that the new Fantastic Four movie will be good under the MCU, but he just doubts it. But we'll see who wins that $5. But Fan Four Stick, just Michael B. Jordan, he could have been a good Human Torch, just not the one we saw in the movie. They did my boy Ben Grimm wrong. Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Girl. They did my boy Doctor Doom so wrong in this movie. Just next. Now, for nostalgic reasons, I don't want to get on Batman and Robin, but I have to, because this is still the worst Batman movie ever made. It was campy as hell. Arnold Schwarzenegger, just misguided casting of Batman. Robin was a whiny bitch. Uma Thurman, God bless you, lady. And Alicia Silverstone as Batgirl. Again, God bless you. Just this whole movie was just a miscalculated mess that put the Batman movies on hold for several years until Christopher Nolan picked it back up. But like I said, I enjoy this movie for nostalgic reasons. Like, it's one of those movies that you can just have a bunch of friends over, get some drinks going, put the movie on, and be like, hey, let's roast Batman and Robin. But objectively speaking, this is the absolute worst Batman movie ever made. The only credit I'll give Catwoman is that Halle Berry was nominated for worst actress in a movie, and she won, and she actually went to that award ceremony and accepted her award. Oscar in one hand, a Razzie in the other, and she was a good sport, so I'll give her that. But the movie as a whole, next. Justice League, not Justice League. I'm calling it Justice League because that is the real director of this movie. I like the Snyder cut, but the theatrical cut of Justice League was just not it. This right here is the perfect example of a studio trying to catch up with Marvel money wise, and we saw how that worked out. Yeah, Madam Web was more recent, but I still hold the scars from that movie. And this right here to me is just the reason why Sony just has a spider track record when it comes to making Spider-Man related movies. Because this movie right here was a total miscalculation on multiple fronts. And yet somehow I will still watch Madam Web again before I watch Morbius again. This movie, it is not Morbin time. The Rise of Skywalker is the worst in the sequel trilogy. And this movie was just a culmination of the studio not having a plan and then falling flat on their face with this movie. In fact, the best way I can describe Disney's handling of the Star Wars sequel trilogy, to quote Woody from the original Toy Story, that wasn't flying, that was falling with style. And yet, to me, the worst thing that came out of Disney Star Wars is Solo, a Star Wars story. I'm sorry, if you like this movie, fine, but to me, this movie just wasn't it for me. This is a movie nobody asked for, nobody needed. It didn't really give us any further context to the Han Solo story, not even Lando or Chewbacca, and in setting up things that have yet to be returned to in either movie form or TV form. This movie was another miscalculation and a movie that should not exist. Now, for nostalgic reasons, I don't want to have to get on one of the prequels, but I have to because to me, this was the worst of the Star Wars prequel trilogy. The bad CGI, the bad acting. I hate saying it's rough, coarse, and irritating, and it gets everywhere. And it has some awesome things in it, but this is clearly the weakest of the prequel trilogy. Tyler Perry's Boo, A Madea Halloween is probably the worst. Well, this one and the Madea Halloween movie, the second Madea Halloween movie. Both of those movies together are the worst Madea movies I have ever seen. These movies were conceptualized off of Tyler Perry seeing Chris Rock make fun of him in the movie Top 5 and saying how he made a Madea Halloween movie, and Tyler Perry ran with that and said, hey, let's do that. And to me, well, to quote Malcolm from Jurassic Park, you were so preoccupied with whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think if you should. Now, Fall from Grace, to me, that was a new low for Tyler Perry because not only was a bad story, which is expected from Tyler Perry, but microphones in the shots, extras clearly drinking nothing out of cups and eating nothing off their plates with forks. The judge has a script on his desk, and you can clearly see him looking off of that, and just the terrible acting. Just like I said, this was a new low for Tyler Perry. Going back to the realm of sci-fi, you got Alien vs. Predator Requiem. I did a review of that. Check it out. This is the worst Alien and Predator movie. Transformers Age of Extinction is the worst of the live-action Transformers movies, especially directed by Michael Bay. It was too long and overabundance on product placements. The story makes absolutely no sense. After Earth, to me, is not just the worst M. Night Shyamalan movie, but it is Will Smith's worst movie. This was a complete misfire to try to prop up his son, and he even admitted he made a mistake trying to do that with this movie. Only because I recently watched this for the first time, but it is just mind-blowing how we go from that classic original Exorcist movie and then go to Exorcist 2, The Heretic. How we go from that to this is beyond my comprehension. Cars 2 is the worst Pixar movie I've ever seen. Period, point blank. The whole concept of Cars I've never really got with in the first place. But Cars 2, you stick away from the whole Cars element and make it a spy movie and make it around the Tomato truck voiced by Larry the Cable Guy. Who wrote this shit? The live-action Mulan, to me, was the worst of these Disney live-action remakes. This is the one that broke me. The live-action Lion King didn't, the live-action Aladdin didn't, but this one did because it's the one where it completely misunderstood what made the original animated Mulan so good. For a long time, I thought Spy Kids 3D was the worst of the Spy Kids movie because I thought it was just the weakest of the Spy Kids movies, and it was horrible 3D. And then Spy Kids 4D came out, which I thought was somehow worse than 3D. I remember my mom asked me to take my sisters to go see this, and oh Jesus. I don't want to have to get on Michael Bay again, but I had to because I feel like Michael Bay must have taken 6 rounds of cocaine when he made this movie. This movie was just nonsensical, nothing but visual noise. This movie just, And then finally, movie 43. How this movie got made is beyond my comprehension, but they mishandled all these talented cast.